I mean, seriously, what is the worst that could possibly happen if you forgot your smart iPhone digital boarding pass app the next time you boarded a Ryanair flight?
Get off my plane.
Whoa. I guess they do take that seriously. That's next on Maximus.
Maximus!
Well, if you consider yourself a flying traditionalist who needs and relies on that tactile feel of printing out your boarding pass and travel documents on good old-fashioned paper, and you were planning to take a Ryanair flight soon, well, you may want to find a different airline, because Ryanair has officially retired paper tickets and boarding passes to the trash bin of aviation history. Beginning November 12, budget airline Ryanair is changing a rule of commercial aviation that has been in use since the beginning of aviation over a century ago. And while many may love this new change, however, many Gen X and Boomers especially may have a hard time coming to grips with this technologically advanced boarding process. And just to ensure that you don't even think about printing out your boarding passes in the future, Ryanair has completely removed the ability to print boarding passes from their website. So that means unless you download the Ryanair app on your smartphone, you won't be able to fly Ryanair after November 12, 2025. Because the only way you're going to get on that luxury jet will be to scan your smartphone using the Ryanair app. All others will be turned away. And while a majority of Ryanair passengers, about 80%, already use the Ryanair smartphone app for boarding, that's still not good enough for Michael O'Leary and Ryanair, because the airline is determined to make everyone ditch paper boarding passes forever. It was over a year ago, back in October 2024, that Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary revealed that the airline would be significantly changing its check-in procedures. Well, this move is certainly significant, because with this move, the airline plans to scrap the concept of paper boarding passes completely, and in the process, totally eliminate that time-honored tradition of the airport check-in. However, for you traditionalists, not all hope is lost, because you will still have to check bags at the airport. But that's a different function than getting personally checked in. But Ryanair claims that since around 80% of their 206+ million annual customers already use the digital boarding passes, CEO O'Leary feels this move simply follows other key industries that have switched to digital tickets only, like music festivals and sporting events. However, currently Ryanair's policy requires passengers to check in online unless they have a Flexi Plus ticket, in which case they can check in at the airport. That's because the Flexi Plus ticket comes with a host of perks and advantages. So those who don't have the Flexi Plus online boarding passes, well, you're going to get royally screwed by Ryanair with a host of additional fees for not getting the Flexi Plus. So, for example, if you don't have the Flexi Plus ticket, the airline has a €55 airport check-in fee, which applies per person per class. And even if you book the €10 ticket, you will still need to pay another $55 to actually check in for your flight. On top of that, the airline charges an additional €20 fee to reissue boarding passes. According to the aviation site 1 Mile at a Time, they say to their knowledge they've never seen an airline go quite this far when it comes to restricting check-in. Though we're talking about Ryanair, they add, an airline that's almost proud of how punitive it can be with customers, calling Ryanair the same airline that insults its customers on social media all day long. But apparently they say that's only tongue-in-cheek. And if you're like me, you probably have questions, and I'm sure the most obvious question is, what do you do if you don't have a smartphone? And it's not that really an odd of a question as you may think, because millions of people the world over still have flip phones or non-smartphones, and some have no phones at all. And while this is less of an issue than ever before, however, elderly or vulnerable passengers might not own a smartphone. And even if they do, they might not be proficient in using the app to download a digital boarding pass. Some of those 20% of passengers who are still printing out paper boarding passes at home are likely being helped by friends and family who won't be with them at the airport to help them with Ryanair's app. Unfortunately, Ryanair didn't offer any advice for these passengers in its press release, and the airline's website doesn't appear to have been updated with information about the switchover and what this might mean for passengers with additional needs. So with that question and many others, it was time to speak to the man himself, That, of course, being 64-year-old Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary. And Ryanair's boss has defended the company's use of digital boarding passes, saying older people will adapt to the system. Well, that sounds ominous. However, O'Leary pointed out that even his 86-year-old mother uses the Ryanair app to travel. Well, I guess Michael has already whipped old Mum into shape, huh? But speaking of the elderly, Ryanair's all-digital solution has been met with criticism, with many accusing the airline of ageism. And according to the Daily Mail, so you know it's got to be true, campaigners representing older travelers have opposed the plans, calling it a disgraceful move and accusing the airline of putting profits above the needs of some of its customers. However, in response to the criticism, Mr. O'Leary told reporters that he was personally amazed by the outrage. Really, Michael? I'm calling fake news on that one. Anyway, he explained his support for the new rule and addressed a key concern, and that is what will happen if your phone dies. The 64-year-old CEO said, "I'm old and I travel Ryanair on a very, very regular basis and I use the Ryanair app. It's pretty simple, pretty easy to use." He said nobody would be cut off at the knees and the airline would be reasonably forgiving of people showing up with paper boarding passes, at least through Christmas and into January. Well, there you go, problem solved. The critical thing O'Leary said was, if you've already checked online before you get there and you lose your phone, we'll have your name in the system. O'Leary said that we will manually board you at the boarding gate. So if your phone goes off, you lose your phone, or your phone gets stolen, it's not going to make an issue as long as you checked in online before you get to the boarding gate. Which, by the way, would eliminate all those outrageous check-in fees at the airport. Well, he didn't say outrageous, I added that part myself. Anyway, O'Leary again trotted out his 86-year-old mother bragging about her use of the app, and he claimed it was a myth that older people could not transition to changes in technology. He said actually what you find is the old people firstly just get their kids or grandkids to make the bookings for them, and then pretty quickly they're adopting it themselves. Adding that it's slightly patronizing this notion that old people can't and won't move to mobile technology or the apps. Yeah, well, frankly, Michael, I think it's patronizing to assume that every old person has access to grandchildren or others who can teach them the process. So that was kind of a stupid thing to say out loud. Anyway, O'Leary said he is confident the older generation will adapt to the new system. Ryanair Chief Marketing Officer said to ensure a seamless transition to 100% digital boarding passes for our customers, we will make the switch from November 12, which is traditionally a slightly quieter time for travel following the busy midterm break period. Ryanair's move to 100% digital boarding passes will mean a faster, smarter, and greener travel experience for our customers, streamlined through our best-in-class My Ryanair app, where passengers will also benefit from helpful in-app features like order to seat and live flight information. However, there is one area of the world that will keep Ryanair from achieving its full 100% digital goal, because there are still a few airports that only accept paper boarding passes. Passengers traveling from Morocco or Turkey, with the exception of Dalaman Airport, must use paper boarding passes, as well as passengers traveling between Tirana, Albania to London. Well, that'll wrap it up for now. But now it's your turn to let me know what you think, especially you old boomers like me. Is this a problem or just the next logical step for air travel? Please be sure and let me know down below.